Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 4 of our reading of William Goldman's The Princess Bride, a hot fairy tale. And we're going to go over the copyright information, which is copyright 1973 by William Goldman. Okay, if I can find the right page here. I'm having trouble. Here. Okay. It says here, all rights reserved, published in the United States by Ballantine Books, a division of Random House Incorporated, New York, and simultaneously in Canada by Ballantine Books of Canada, Limited, Toronto, Canada. And it says down here, cover art by Norman Green. Anyways, in the last part, the novel started. We're into The Princess Bride now, and we met Buttercup. She apparently doesn't like to bathe. She likes horses, and the city girls don't like her because all the boys like her or something, and she isn't really interested in the boys or something. Anyways, we're going to continue where we left off because this is getting interesting. And I just want to read this first because it was kind of a fun passage. The boys, the village boys, the beef-witted, feather-brained, rattle-skulled, clod-pated, dim-domed, noodle-noggined, sap-headed, lunk-knobbed boys. How could anyone accuse her of stealing them? Why would anyone want them anyway? What good were they? All they did was pester and vex and annoy. Can I brush your horse, Buttercup? Thank you, but the farm boy does that. Can I go riding with you, Buttercup? Thank you, but I really do enjoy myself alone. You think you're too good for anyone, don't you, Buttercup? No, I don't. I just like riding by myself, that's all. But throughout her 16th year, even this kind of talk gave way to stammering and flushing, and at the very best, questions about the weather. Do you think it's going to rain, Buttercup? I don't think so. The sky is blue. Well, it might rain. Yes, I suppose it might. Do you think you're too good for anyone, don't you, Buttercup? No, I just don't think it's going to rain. That's all. At night, more often than not, they would congregate in the dark behind her window and laugh about her. She ignored them. Usually the laughter would give way to insult. She paid them no mind. If they grew too damaging, the farm boy handled things, emerging silently from his hovel, thrashing a few of them, sending them flying. She never failed to thank him when he did this. As you wish, was all he ever answered. When she was almost 17, a man in a carriage came to town and watched as she rode for provisions. He was still there on her return, peering out. She paid him no mind, and indeed, by himself, he was not important. But he marked a turning point. Other men had gone out of their way to catch sight of her. Other men had even ridden 20 miles for the privilege, as this man had. The importance here is that this was the first rich man who had bothered to do so, the first noble, and it was this man whose name is lost to antiquity, who mentioned Buttercup to the Count. The land of Florin was set between where Sweden and Germany would eventually settle. This was before Europe. In theory, it was ruled by King Lotharin and his second wife, the Queen, but in fact, the king was barely hanging on, could only rarely tell day from night, and basically spent his time in muttering. He was very old. Every organ in his body had long since betrayed him, and most of his important decisions regarding Florin had a certain arbitrary quality that bothered many of the leading citizens. Prince Humperdinck actually ran things. If there had been a Europe, he would have been the most powerful man in it. Even as it was, nobody within 1,000 miles wanted to mess with him. The Count was Prince Humperdinck's only confidant. His last name was Rugen, but no one needed to use it. He was the only count in the country, the title having been bestowed by the prince as a birthday present some years before, the happening taking place, naturally, at one of the countess's parties. The countess was considerably younger than her husband. All of her clothes came from Paris. This was after Paris. And she had superb taste. This was aftertaste too, but only just. And since and since it was such a new thing, and since the Countess was the only lady in all Florin to possess it, is it any wonder she was the leading hostess of the land? Eventually, her passion for fabric and face paint caused her to settle permanently in Paris, where she ran the only salon of international consequence. For now, she busied herself with simply sleeping on silk, eating on gold, and being the single most feared and admired woman in Florini's history. If she had figure faults, her clothes concealed them. If her face was less than divine, it was hard to tell once she got done applying substances. This was before glamour, but if it hadn't been for ladies like the Countess, there would never have been a need for this invention. In sum, the Rugans were a couple of the week in Florin and had been for many years. This is me, all abridging remarks and other comments will be in the fancy italics type so you'll know. When I said at the start that I'd never read this book, that's true. My father read it to me, and I just quickly skimmed along, crossing out whole sections when I did the abridging, having everything just as it was in the original, leaving everything just as it was in the original Morgenstern. This chapter is totally intact. My intrusion here is because of the way Morgenstern used parentheses. The copy editor at Harcourt kept filling the margins of the gallery proofs with questions. How can it be before Europe but after Paris? And how is it possible this happened before glamour, when glamour is an ancient concept? See, glamour in the old Oxford Dictionary, and eventually I am going crazy. What am I to make of all these parentheses? When does this book take place? I don't understand anything. Help! Denise, the copy editor, had done all my books since Boys and Girls Together, and she had never been as emotional in the margins with me before. I couldn't help her. Either Morgenstern meant this seriously or he didn't, or maybe he meant some of them seriously and some others he didn't, but he never said which were the serious ones, or maybe it was just the author's way of telling the reader stylistically that this isn't real, it never happened. That's what I think, in spite of the fact that if you read back into Florian history, it did happen. The facts, anyway, no one can say about the actual motivations. All I can suggest is that to you is that the parentheses bug you. That if the parentheses bug you, don't read them. Quick, come. Buttercup's father stood in the farmhouse, staring out the window. Why? This from the mother. She gave away nothing when it came to obedience. The father made a quick finger point. Look. You look, and you look. You know how. Buttercup's parents did not have exactly what you would call a happy marriage. All they ever dreamed of was leaving each other. Buttercup's father shrugged and went back to the window. Ah, he said, after a while, and a little later again, ah. Buttercup's mother glanced up briefly from her cooking. Such riches, Buttercup's father said. Glorious. Buttercup's mother hesitated and put her stew spoon down. This is after stew, but so is everything. When the first man clambered from the slime and made his first home on land, what he had for supper that first night was stew. The heart swells at the magnificence, Buttercup's father muttered very loudly. What exactly is it, Dumpling? Buttercup's mother wanted to know. You look. You know how. Well, after he replied, this was their 33rd spat of the day. This was long after spats, and he was behind 13 to 20, but he had made up a lot of distance since lunch. When a 17 when it was 17-2 against him. Donkey, the mother said, and came over to the window. A moment later, she was going, ah, right along with him. Lots of ah. They stood there, the two of them, tiny and odd from setting the dinner table. Buttercup watched them. They must be going to meet Prince Humperdinck someplace, Buttercup's mother said. The father nodded. Hunting. That's what the prince does. How lucky we are to have seen them pass by, Buttercup's mother said, and she took her husband's hand. The old man nodded. Now I can die. She glanced at him. Don't. Her tone was surprisingly tender, and probably she sensed how important he really was to her, because when he said die 2 years further on, she went right after, and most of the people who knew her well agreed it was the sudden lack of opposition that undid her. Buttercup came close and stood behind them, staring over them, and soon she was gasping too, because the Count and Countess were and all their pages and soldiers and servants and couriers and champions and carriages were passing by the cart track at the front of the farm. The three stood in silence as the procession moved forward. Buttercup's father was a tiny mutt of a man who had always dreamed of living like the Count. He had once been 2 miles from where the Count and Prince had been hunting, and until this moment, that had been the high point of his life. He was a terrible farmer, and not much of a husband either. There wasn't really much in this world he excelled at, and he could never quite figure out how he happened to sire his daughter. But he knew deep down that it must have been some kind of wonderful mistake, the nature of which he had no intention of investigating. Buttercup's mother was a gnarled shrimp of a woman, thorny and worrying, who had always dreamed of somehow just once being popular like the Countess was said to be. She was a terrible cook and even more limited housekeeper. How Buttercup slid from her womb was, of course, beyond her, but she had been there when it happened. That was enough for her. Buttercup herself stood half ahead over her parents, still holding the dinner dishes, still smelling of horse. Only wish that the great procession wasn't quite so far away, so she could see if the Countess's clothes were really all that lovely. As if in answer to her request, the procession turned and began entering the farm. Here? Buttercup's father managed. Oh, goodness, why? Buttercup's mother whirled on him. Did you forget to pay your taxes? This was after taxes, but everything is after taxes. Taxes were here even before stew. Even if I did, they wouldn't need all that to collect them. He gestured towards the front of his farm, where now the Count and Countess and all their pages and soldiers and servants and couriers and champions, courtiers and champions and carriages were coming closer and closer. What could they want to ask me about? He said. Go see, Buttercup's mother told him. Yeah. You go, please. No, you please. We'll both go. They both went trembling. Cows, the Count said, when they reached his golden carriage. I would like to talk about your cows. He spoke from inside, his dark face darkened by shadow. My cows? Buttercup's father said. Yes, you see, I'm thinking of starting a little dairy. Dairy what? Of my own. And since your cows are known throughout the land as being Florin's finest, I thought I might pry your secrets from you. My cows? Buttercup's father managed to repeat, hoping he was not going mad, because the truth was, and he knew it well, he had terrible cows. For years, nothing but complaints from the people in the village. If anyone else had had milk to sell, he would have been out of business in a minute. Now, granted, things had improved since the farm boy had come to slave for him. No question, the farm boy had certain skills, and the complaints were quite non-existent now. But that didn't make his the finest cows in Florin. Still, you didn't argue with the Count. Buttercup's father turned to his wife. What would you say my secret is, my dear? He asked. Oh, they are so many, she said. She was no dummy, not when it came to the quality of their livestock. You two are childless, are you? The count asked them. No, sir, the mother answered. Then let me see her, the count went on. Perhaps she will be quicker with her answers than her parents. Buttercup, the father called, turning. Come out, please. How did you know we had a daughter? Buttercup's mother wondered. I guess I assume I guess I assumed it had to be one or the other. Some days I'm luckier than he simply stopped talking then, because Buttercup moved into view, hurrying from the house to her parents. The Count left the carriage. Gracefully he moved to the ground and stood very still. He was a big man with black hair and black eyes and great shoulders and a black cape and gloves. Curtsy, dear, Buttercup's mother whispered. Buttercup did her best, and the Count could not stop looking at her. Understand now, she was barely rated in the top 20. Her hair was uncombed, unclean. Her age was just 17, so there was still in occasional places the remains of baby fat. Nothing had been done to the child. Nothing was really there but potential. But the Count still could not rip his eyes away. The Count would like to know the secret behind our cow's greatness. Is that not correct, sir? Buttercup's father said. The Count was nodding, staring. Even Buttercup's mother noticed a certain tension in the air. Ask the farm boy. He tends them, Buttercup said. And is that the farm boy? Came a new voice from inside the carriage. Then the Countess's face was framed in the carriage doorway. Her lips were painted a perfect red, her green eyes lined in black. All the colors of the world were muted in her gown. Buttercup wanted to shield her eyes from the brilliance. Buttercup's father glanced back toward the lone figure peering around the corner of the house. It is. Bring him to me. He is not dressed properly for such an occasion, Buttercup's mother said. I have seen bare chests before, the Countess replied. When she called out, You! She pointed at the farm boy. Come here. Her fingers snapped on here. The farm boy did as he was told. And where he was and when he was close, the Countess left the carriage. When he was a few paces behind Buttercup, he stopped, head properly bowed. He was ashamed of his attire, worn boots and torn blue jeans. Blue jeans were invented considerably before most people suppose. And his hands were tight together in almost a gesture of supplication. Have you a name, farm boy? Wesley, Countess. Well, Wesley, perhaps you can help us with our problem. She crossed to him. The fabric of her gown grazed his skin. We are all of us here passionately interested in the subject of cows. We are particularly reaching the point of frenzy. Such is our curiosity. Why do you suppose, Wesley, that the cows of this particular farm are the finest in all Florin? What do you do to them? I just feed them, Countess. Well, then, there it is. The mystery is solved. The secret we can all rest. Clearly, the magic is in Wesley's feeding. Show me how you do it, would you, Wesley? Feed the cows? Feed the cows for you, Countess? Bright lad. When? Now would be soon enough. And she held out her arm to him. Lead me, Wesley. Wesley had no choice but to take her arm. Gently. It's behind the house, ma'am. It's terribly muddy back there. Your gown will be ruined. I wear them only once, Wesley, and I burn to see you in action. So off they went to the cowshed. Throughout all this, the Count kept watching Buttercup. I'll help you, Buttercup called after Wesley. Perhaps I'd best see just how he does it, the Count decided. Strange things are happening, Buttercup's parents said, and off they went to, bringing up the rear of the cow-feeding trip, watching the Count, who was watching their daughter, who was watching the Countess, who was watching Wesley. I couldn't see what he did that was so special, Buttercup's father said. He just fed them. That was after dinner. that was after dinner now, and the family was alone again. They must like him personally. I had a cat once, and that only bloomed when I fed him. Perhaps it's the same kind of thing. Buttercup's mother scraped the stew leavings into a bowl. Here, she said to her daughter, Wesley's waiting by the back door. Take him his dinner. Buttercup carried the bowl, opened the back door. Take it, she said. He nodded, accepting, starting off to his tree stump to eat. I didn't excuse you, farm boy, Buttercup began. He stopped, turned back to her. I don't like what you're doing with horse. What you're not doing with horse is more to the point. I want him cleaned tonight. I want his hooves varnished tonight. I want his tail plaited and his ears massaged. This very evening, I want his stables spotless. Now, I want him glistening, and if it takes you all night, it takes you all night, as you wish. She slammed the door and let him eat in darkness. I thought Horse had been looking very well, actually, her father said. Buttercup said nothing. You yourself said so yesterday, her mother reminded her. I must be overtired, Buttercup managed. The excitement and all. Rest then, her mother cautioned. Terrible things can happen when you're overtired. I was overtired the night your father proposed, 34 to 22, and pulled away. Buttercup went to her room. She lay on her bed. She closed her eyes, and the Countess was staring at Wesley. Buttercup got up from bed. She took off her clothes. She washed a little. She got into her nightgown. She slipped between the sheets, snuggled down, closed her eyes. The Countess was still staring at Wesley. Buttercup threw back the sheets, opened her door. She went to the sink by the stove and poured herself a cup of water. She drank it down. She poured another cup and rolled its coolness across her forehead. The feverish feeling was still there. How feverish? She felt fine. She was 17 and not even a cavity. She dumped the water firmly into the sink, turned, marched back to her room, shut the door tight, went back to bed. She closed her eyes. The Countess would not stop staring at Wesley. Why? Why in the world would the woman in all the history of Florin, who was in all ways perfect, be interested in the farm boy? Buttercup rolled around in bed, and there simply was no other way of explaining that look. She was interested. Buttercup shut her eyes tight and studied the memory of the Countess. Clearly, something about the farm boy interested her. Facts were facts, but what? The farm boy had eyes, like the sea before a storm, but who cared about eyes? And he had pale blonde hair, if you like that sort of thing, and he was broad enough in the shoulders, but not all that much broader than the Count, and certainly he was muscular, but anyone could be muscular who slaved all day, and his skin was perfect and tan, but that came again from slaving in the sun all day. Who wouldn't be tan? And he wasn't that much taller than the Count either, although his stomach was flatter, but that was because the farm boy was younger. Buttercup sat up in bed. It must have been his teeth. The farm boy did have good teeth. Give credit where credit is due. White and perfect, particularly set against the sun-tanned face. Could it have been anything else? Buttercup concentrated. The girls in the village followed the farm boy around a lot whenever he was making deliveries, but they were idiots. They followed anything, and he always ignored them because if he'd ever opened his mouth, they would have realized that was all he had, just good teeth. He was, after all, exceptionally stupid. It was really very strange that a woman as beautiful and slender and willowy and graceful, a creature as perfectly packaged, as supremely dressed as the Countess, should be hung up on teeth that way. Buttercup shrugged. People were surprisingly complicated, but now she had it all deduced clearly. She closed her eyes and snuggled down and got all nice and comfortable. And people didn't look at other people the way the Countess looked at the farm boy because of their teeth. Oh, Buttercup gasped. Oh dear. Now the farm boy was staring back at the Countess and was feeding the cows, and his muscles were rippling the way they always did under his tan skin, and Buttercup was standing there watching as the farm boy looked for the first time deep into the Countess's eyes. Buttercup jumped out of bed and began to pace her room. How could he? Oh, it was all right if he looked at her, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at her. She's so old, Buttercup muttered, starting to storm a bit now. The Countess would never see 30 again, and that was fact. And her dress looked ridiculous out in the cowshed, and that was fact too. Buttercup fell onto her bed and clutched her pillow across her breasts. The dress was ridiculous before it even got to the cowshed. The Countess looked rotten the minute she left the carriage, with her too big painted mouth and her little piggy painted eyes and her powdered skin and flailing and thrashing. Buttercup wept and tossed and paced and wept some more. And there had been 3 great cases of jealousy since David of Galilee was first afflicted by the emotion, when he could no longer stand the fact of his neighbor Saul's cactus outshone his own. Originally, jealousy pertained solely to plants, other people's cactuses or ginkgos, or later, when there was grass was, which is why, even to this day, we say that someone is green with jealousy. Buttercup's case rated a close 4th to the all-time list. Oh, okay. Okay, we get to page 47. Let's close this up. There. We've been reading William Goldman's The Princess Bride, a hot fairy tale. Anyways, if you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, if you want to support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.